Your calls, your stories. Mornings with Kaye Adams on BBC Radio Scotland.
Now, this has been an incredibly controversial and emotive case stretching back 5 years when 22-year-old Ched Evans was found guilty and given a 5-year sentence for raping a 19-year-old girl in a hotel room in Rhyl. She was drunk and his friend was having sex with her when Evans walked into the room and also began having sex with her. She woke in the morning alone with no memory of what had gone on. Fast forward to Friday, and at a retrial, Evans was acquitted. Now, this case has divided, even fragmented public opinion. At opposite ends of the scale, some feel that Evans is the victim and his accuser's identity should be made public. Others feel that the girl has been put on trial, with new witnesses being brought forward to attest to her sexual history. She has been subjected to vile abuse online, has had to move home several times, and is now said to be considering a move to Australia. Where do your sympathies lie? 0500 92 95 00. Ched Evans has never apologised to the girl. He says he never could, given that he has always maintained his innocence. Does he have anything to apologise for? A lot of the coverage in the newspapers today, as I say, opinion is very much divided, but some people saying they want an apology. Does he have anything to apologise for? He says he wants to campaign for greater education around the issues of alcohol and sexual consent. Would that perhaps be a positive to emerge from this? 80295 is the text number. You can email k@bbc.co.uk. But the number again, 0500 92 95 00. Looking at the text, Ian says, Ched was lucky that he could afford to clear his name. How many other men have been the victim of feminist-driven justice? Dave in Aberdeen says, in rape cases, it is ridiculous that only the accused is named. Surely it is only fair for either both parties to be named or for neither to be named. And yes, there are some people calling for her identity to be revealed. Another text in, Ched Evans' legal team tried and succeeded to trash the victim by finding 2 other men she had sex with. So because she liked having sex, how could he have raped her? Disgusting decision in 2016. Let me know what you think of this one. It raises so many issues. 0500 92 95 00 is a number to call. Carla's in Glasgow. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Kay.
Hi, good morning. As I say, that there's so many potential reactions to this, Carla. We don't want to present it as a binary, you know, are you on his side or her side? Just tell us how you feel about it.
I feel really saddened by the whole thing. I think it's important to note that, first of all, he has been acquitted through a lack of evidence. It's not proven that this woman has lied. His legal team and his millionaire girlfriend have offered a reward, and now these men have come forward to trash her character. The fact that her sexual history has been used in court is really concerning. I think that set us back. It took a long time for us to be able to convict husbands of raping wives. Is that now going to set that back again? I think the whole thing has echoes of the case in America, where the swimmer, I can't remember his name, but he got about 3 months in jail for raping a college student behind a dumpster. Mm-hmm. And he and his father had called for greater education around drinking at parties, and it now sounds like Ched Evans is going down this route. I think the whole thing is going to discourage women from reporting. We already have a very poor rape conviction rate in Scotland. And what I would ask the people who feel this is feminist justice is, do you actually think all those other women are lying?
You used the word sad, Carla. That's your overwhelming emotion.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like it set us back.
Right, okay. Stay with us, Carla. I'm going to bring in Mike Buchanan, leader of Justice for Men and Boys political party. Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Kay.
Good morning. Carla just saying there, and it's quite interesting to ask people to put a kind of overwhelming emotion on this. It makes her feel very sad, particularly sad about the fact that this woman's sexual history was brought into play, and she fears that it might discourage other women from reporting rape in the future. How do you feel about that?
I feel the person that we should feel sad for is Ched Evans. I mean, he's been in prison for, he's an innocent man, always was an innocent man, and he was in prison for 2.5 years, and he's still suffering. Look, drunk men and women have been having sex since time immemorial. Why is it that only men are held criminally responsible, not women? Whatever sober woman has sex with a drunk man, do we consider that to be rape? Of course we don't.
Okay, let me bring it.
But perhaps we should. It's well known, Kaye, that over 25% of sexual offences against the opposite sex are carried out by women, but the criminal justice system takes no interest in that. And plus, also, men hold them.
Where's your evidence for that, Mike?
There's a very, very major survey in the United States, Kaye, which showed, I think, 27 or 28%.
Yeah, I think we're all going to have to be careful this morning of quoting this survey and that survey, because, as we know, lies, damned lies, and statistics. That we can absolutely take your broad point there, Mike. Absolutely can take that. And so Carla, stay with us because I'm interested to get your thoughts. But let's bring in Sandy Brindley, who's a national coordinator for Rape Crisis Scotland. Hi, Sandy.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, how would you respond to Mike? I mean, his is not a lone voice in terms of this big discussion, that actually the person to feel sorry for here is Ched Evans. This is a man who was acquitted of rape, who spent 2.5 years in prison for an offence that has, for a crime that has now been dropped. His footballing career is in tatters. His reputation is in tatters, and it wouldn't work the same the other way around.
I think it's important to be clear about the facts of the case. Ched Evans was convicted of rape by a jury. The only difference between that trial where he was convicted and his acquittal last week was the introduction of sexual history evidence of two men who changed their statements following the offer of a £50,000 reward by Ched Evans' partner's family.
We do not know that any money has passed hands, Sandy.
Yeah, but that was when they changed their statements, was after the award.
But we don't know that, do we?
We don't know, but the biggest concern for us, even leaving aside the question of financial inducement, is about why was this sexual history evidence relevant to what happened on that night. The two men who have come forward and claimed to have sex with her, the only reason their evidence was considered relevant, and that this is where they did change their statement, or added to their statement, is that they claimed that there was similarities in sexual position and words she used when they had sex with her and Ched Evans had sex with her. This was the only evidence that was different in the two trials. And I suppose for us...
And on the basis of that, a jury acquitted him, Sandy.
Exactly, that a jury acquitted him. And I think that this is the reason why sexual history evidence is a particularly vexed issue across the world, is because it is so prejudicial to juries. This is why lots of countries have restricted it, including Scotland, is because what it suggests, in our view, or what's intended to suggest, is this is the type of woman who is likely to have consented to sex. And for us, that is not justice.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll talk about the sexual history, because obviously it's a main part of this entire story. But I mean, could you look at it, Sandy, as saying these are two young people, both of whose lives have been utterly turned upside down. Both of them, young, naive, drunk. It's a mess. The whole situation's a blooming mess. But actually, there can be sympathy for both.
Well, I suppose to me the only reason Ched Evans is no longer a convicted rapist is because of the use of sexual history evidence. So I think that does make me quite reluctant to feel sympathy for him. I think it is an awful situation. The level of abuse, particularly the complainer, the woman in this case has suffered, I think is absolutely appalling. And I think that the concern is really what impact does this case have? I do agree. I think some commentators have said it's taken us back 30 years in terms of rape reform and encouraging women to come forward and report a rape. And I think that's a genuine concern following what this woman's been put through.
Okay. And on the broad point, and I know we've got time to discuss this. We can go on as long as we want to this morning. I just want to get people's thoughts, a broad kind of gut reaction as to where your sympathies lie. And of course, it can be with both. But Sandy Brindley, very much her sympathies lying with the girl here, and find it very difficult to have any real sympathy for Ched Evans. Mike Buchanan is on the opposite side of this. 0500 92 95 00 is the number to call. John's in Glasgow. Hi, John.
Yes, good morning, Kate.
Good morning. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I feel that there's no point in having juries. Why don't we just have radio, television and newspapers to deliver verdicts?
Mm-hmm. Why are you saying that, John?
Yeah, well, this seems to be what's happening. If someone's found not guilty, then there's an automatic upsurge about it. If someone's found guilty, it's the same thing. So what's the point of having juries?
Well, we do have juries, and the juries have decided in this case that Ched Evans should be acquitted of rape.
That should be the end of it.
Right. And how's have you been following the case? Have you had any thoughts about it, John?
Is, but she wasn't exactly the Bristol Virgin, was she? She was even supposed to be brought or drunk, so how can she remember what actually happened?
Well, the whole point, John, is that she doesn't remember what happened,
and
that's how this came to
raped.
Well, actually, the facts of it are that she went to the police to say that she didn't know what had happened and that her bag had been stolen, and from that point, the police went and took statements, found that these two footballers, including Ched Evans, had sex with her. The girl had no recollection of it, and they brought the case of rape.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Why?
Oh, it just doesn't make sense. If you really think about it, it just doesn't make sense. There's no recollection of it. She hasn't got a bag. She goes to the police. They go forward, discover the two men had sex with her. The whole thing's just ridiculous, The guy spent, I don't know how many years in jail over this. It's ridiculous.
2.5.
Well, that's ridiculous. And now you'd come about £500,000. That's not near anything near enough of what that guy's went through.
So you think he should have compensation?
He spent 2.5 years in jail for something, for apparently having sex with someone that was right out of mind with drink, for God's sake.
Okay. Carla, what do you think of that? Carla? Do we have Carla there?
Hi.
Hi, Carla.
I think essentially what your man here is saying is that drunk women cannot be raped. Is that correct?
How can a drunk woman know she's been raped when she can't remember what happened?
Because there was evidence of it.
Where's the evidence? The jury didn't find it.
The jury found a lack of evidence committing a crime, which is one person's word against another.
Yeah, that's it.
But there was evidence. His friend was texting to say, "I've got a girl." She obviously had swabs taken. I'm not sure of the ins and outs. But essentially what you're saying is that because she was drunk, she couldn't have been raped.
Well, how does anybody know when she was drunk she didn't say go ahead?
Well, how does anybody know when she was drunk? He didn't.
No, why should he be prosecuted in that case then? Think about it, it doesn't make sense.
It does to me. I think
Carla, why, just separately from John's line here, but why do you believe it was right to bring a prosecution? Given that the woman herself didn't have any recollection of the night's events, and it was actually the police and the Crown Prosecution Service that went forward with it. Why do you think it was right that a prosecution was brought in the first place?
Yes, because it's okay that she didn't remember what happened. A lot of people may not recall a physical assault against themselves. This is another form of assault. So if there was evidence that pointed to the fact that she was raped, then yeah, it's right to bring a conviction whether or not she remembers it.
Mike Buchanan, let me bring you in on this. And clearly this is where this case has left us, as what does constitute rape and this whole issue of consent. Do you agree with Carla? I suspect you don't.
Well, the law is just a complete ass in this area. I go back to the point that people, have drunken sex. Sometimes they regret it. Why is it only the man who's held criminally responsible? And the fact is that is so because the Sexual Offences Act, 2003, has under that act only men can commit rape. But there's plenty of men. I'm sorry, Kay, the line wasn't too good. But there's plenty of men who've woken up having had sex with a woman and regretted it. But men tend to take responsibility for these things, and women, according to the criminal justice system and the legislature, are always victims. Men are always perpetrators, and women are always victims.
So
but, you have to ask. This woman's sexual history was relevant because a week or two before and a week or two after, and who knows beyond that, she clearly had a taste for drunken sex with a variety of men over that period. And how can that not be relevant to to the case.
Well, I mean, to say she clearly had a taste for drunken sex, I mean, 2 people have come forward and their testimonies were used in this retrial. I mean, they did come forward after an appeal on the part of the Evans camp, which money was offered, and we have no knowledge of any money passing hands, but it is quite an unusual situation. Sandy Brindley, I know you're going to have to leave us soon, and the lines are lighting up on us with people coming in from all sorts of directions, 0500 92 95 00. But it's an interesting point that Mike Buchanan makes, isn't it? We know there's a lot of drunken sex going on out there, people not quite remembering the next morning quite what happened. Why is it that it's always the blokes who potentially are kind of, held responsible and criminally held responsible?
I think that the law is clear that if somebody, man or woman, is so drunk they are incapable of consenting, then consent is presumed to be absent and it's rape. And I think that is a really important message to get out there in terms of people's understanding of what rape actually is. And I do think maybe some of the comments that Mike has made has illustrated why we do need legislation to restrict the use of sexual history evidence, because what juries should be deciding is the facts and circumstances of the incident in question, not what somebody's sexual history was. And I do also want to make the point that it's alleged these men are saying they had sex with her, and that there's similarities between what happened with them and with Ched Evans. But this is only their word, and certainly my understanding is the woman disputes it. She says that she had sex with one of the men, but it was 2 months before the rape, and she didn't make any of the comments that are supposed to have been attributed to her.
Well, but the court decided to accept their evidence. I certainly agree with you. I think it's very interesting that their evidence does not seem to be particularly efficiently corroborated, but the court decided to accept it. But what Mike is saying, the law is an ass here. That's what he's saying. Now, you could say, well, the law states clearly. What he's saying is the law has got it wrong. The fact is that a lot of people, men and women, the nature of social lives these days is they go out, they have a good bevy, they get absolutely mortal, they really can't remember, and they sleep with each other. And in such circumstances that we know exist, the rape around law is not safe.
Well, I think if you look at the Ched Evans case, he was sober enough to read a text from his friend saying, I've got a girl, go to a hotel room, have sex with her. We obviously can't use the word rape because his conviction has been overturned. He had sex with her, then he left by a secret entrance. Is that really the behaviour of a man who's so drunk that he has no capacity? I don't think it is. I think that's the behaviour. In general terms, I think men who target very, very drunk women.
But is that the behaviour of a rapist? And you're right, his conviction he has been acquitted of his conviction, but is that the behaviour of a rapist or is that the behaviour of a cad?
Well, I think it's somebody who was convicted of rape. I think that's very serious. The initial jury were obviously convinced about his behaviour. I do think, leaving aside the criminal law, I think there is something about that behaviour, about what kind of man wants to have sex with women in those circumstances when she's clearly very, very, very drunk. I think
somebody might say on the other side of this, what kind of woman, wants to be in a hotel room, blind drunk, making themselves vulnerable to, she went back to the hotel with this guy. And I'm not making any moral judgment on her, but if we're going to make moral judgment on one party, do you have to make a moral judgment on the other?
Well, I think it's whether or not a crime has been committed. The view of the original jury was that a crime had committed because she had no capacity at all to consent. And I suppose the worry is about what does this case mean. I think we do need to, whatever people think about women or men getting so drunk, there still needs to be some protection from criminal behaviour, because we know that some men are predators and deliberately target very, very drunk women. And are we saying the law can provide no protection in these circumstances? Okay. That is not where I think we want to be.
Yeah. Sandy, it's very, very murky stuff. There's no doubt about it. And absolutely, there are so many issues within this we should be discussing. 0500 92 95 9500. I want to know first and foremost your reaction to this case, which has been in the headlines on and off for quite some months, more than that now. Where do your sympathies lie, and do you think we do have the capacity, the legal capacity, to make fair judgments in these kind of situations? You can text us on 80295. Anne West has been on Facebook, says the way his defence was submitted has put the system back years. Women victims will be even more reluctant to report rape now. The only difference in the evidence was the two witnesses who were called at the second trial, and that is indeed the case. Two men who came forward and said that they had also had sex with this woman around about the time of the alleged offence, and that similar language and behaviour was displayed. Bill says there's a message here for young women not to get so intoxicated that they don't know what they're doing on a night out. That's a good question there. I mean, this is a right old mess, this situation, isn't it? If there's any lesson to be learned, if there's any message to be taken from it, what is it for you? 0500 92 95 00. Right. Come back to James and Rachel after this. Getting your thoughts this morning on the Ched Evans case. He was acquitted of rape at a retrial on Friday. Get back to your calls in just a second. Joanne Lewis has posted on Facebook, how was Ched Evans acquitted? Was consent ever established with him? From what I've heard, the female involved doesn't recall anything about the night in question. I don't see how one of them could be acquitted and not the other. Was Ched Evans being made an example of? Another one here, if a drunk man is beyond consent, the chances are he's also beyond sex. Biology plays a part here, and prostitutes can be raped. What chance would they have in court with their sexual history? Lots of people very concerned about the use of sexual history in this second retrial. But Mike Buchanan, leader of Justice for Men and Boys political party, says, the law is an ass here. The law is not equipped to behave with common social behaviour where both men and women are getting out, getting drunk, having sex and having very vague memories of it the morning after. Why, he says, should men always be the ones to be held criminally responsible for this behaviour? So we've got Ched Evans, promising young footballer who spent 2.5 years in prison, his footballing career in tatters. He has now been acquitted of the charge of rape, or the conviction of rape. And we have a young woman who has been subjected to some vile abuse. Well, I say some vile abuse. I mean, just unbelievably horrendous abuse, despite the fact that her anonymity has been protected. Social media is no great respecter of that. She's had to move house on various occasions. She's not been able to hold down a job. The newspapers tell us this morning she's considering having to move abroad to get away from this. So 2 lives in absolute tatters. Where do your sympathies lie? 0500 92 95 00. Rachel's in Forest. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Kate.
Morning. Morning. What are you making of this, Rachel?
Well, I phoned in with the point about anonymity for and how it is always a huge thing that there's anonymity for the victim and not for the supposed perpetrator, alleged perpetrator, for the man. And I just feel that I can see exactly why they have that. But, it should be anonymity for both, or they're both named and or whatever. And I can see exactly why they have that. But the point is, like, they have the man's name out there for other people to come forward and say, oh, yes, he raped me. That's their reason. That's always their reasoning. Well, I can't remember a time when I didn't hear about this Ched Evans thing. It must have been going on for about the last five years. And nobody else has come forward and said, yes, he raped me too. He's always raping somebody. Do you know what I mean? So nobody has come forward and said that. So it must work both ways. The man must get some points if, well, nobody else has come forward and said anything last. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that should maybe be taken into account a little bit as well. That was my point. And the other thing is, I can see exactly why sexual history and everything is not, they wouldn't want that to come forward, and it's going to discourage women from coming forward and what have you. And, and all the rape crisis people are up in arms, and I can see exactly why. But I think if you asked every single one of them, if they had sons and they were being accused by a lassie that, according to all the papers and what have you, as you're saying, is definitely of slightly looser morals, shall we say. If my son was being accused by somebody like that, and there is lassies like that, I would want every single one of those things to be brought forward. Do you know what I mean? If she was slightly...
Yeah, very honest. Well, let's have a discussion around that. James in Sutherland, morning.
Good morning, Kay.
Good morning.
Kay, there's a number of issues about this that bugs me. I'd like to know if there's an appeal that the women can actually take to a higher court with Ched Evans.
We do have a criminal lawyer with us, so I will ask him in just a tick.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. There's a number of issues that sort of strike me about it. There's not a word being said about Ched Evans' sexual history. The woman there was just sort of suggesting or talking about his history and not being accused of rape. But then no one's been offered £50,000, have they? So there's that. But it's just the idea, the woman in the case, she's in the room with this guy having sex with her. I don't think she had a prior arrangement with Ched Evans. By the way, I'll see you later at a hotel. I don't think the guy in the room with her said, by the way, I've invited a mate along. If someone's having sex outdoors, and some folk do, and someone happened to be passing on their way to buy their local newspaper, can they just join in because the woman was already having sex?
Rachel?
Yes, this is it. It gets completely murky and what have you. But this lassie did have a history of doing this type of thing. It's definitely not somebody with an awful lot of I would say it would be somebody with definite self-esteem issues and what have you. And so, yes, I can see, yes, come along. I mean, what does she expect? She's with young footballers and I wouldn't. Oh God Almighty! I didn't. You see, this is it. As soon as you start,
but Rachel, we're having an honest conversation here. You're expressing things that will be going through other people's minds. There'll be people shouting at the radio, listening to you, Rachel. There will be other people nodding their heads. Yeah. Let's see what Brenna in Edinburgh thinks.
Okay.
Morning, Brenna.
Good morning.
Good morning. You screaming at the radio or nodding your head?
Absolutely screaming at the radio. I think that this whole discussion has been absolutely horrific and has continued to blame victims more than they already are already, which is frankly quite a lot. I think that the idea that bringing up a woman's sexual history as though that is the most important element and as though that is some judgment on her moral character. I don't care whether a woman does missionary or does any other bloody position. I think that women deserve respect for being women, and the idea that this entire discussion can be centered around whether or not she put herself in a vulnerable position. Did she? I don't know. Did she deserve it? Does she have self-respect? That's not what the conversation should be about. Yes, Ched Evans has been acquitted, but we need to be having much broader conversations that don't involve getting a known misogynist, Mike Buchanan, on the radio. And to be honest, my message is just that I wanted to use this platform to say to any survivors of sexual violence out there that I believe you, we believe you, and there are so many people who are on your side.
Well, I mean, Brenna, we have had Mike Buchanan. I think he's left us now, who is from, and let me get his title, the Leader of Justice for Men and Boys Political Party. And I can totally understand from having listened to you that you, in fact, he's still with us, you will have no sympathy with any of his views. But the whole point of having these discussions is we have to hear it all, Brenna. Because
but you don't have to hear from liars who say that 99.7% of refuge places go to battered women, when there are as many battered women as battered men. It is fundamental lies. There's a difference between getting different perspectives and getting people Mike, who are known to hate women.
Well, Brenna, I mean, you have brought up that statistic. Mike didn't bring it up. And when Mike did bring up a study, I said to him, we have to be very careful about bringing up studies because we can all bring up unfounded pieces of information. So we're not having that. We're talking much more broadly than that. But Mike Buchanan, you're on the line.
Yes, Kate.
Are you a lying misogynist?
No, I'm not. I'm not either. The charge of misogyny has never been substantiated, or lying. But it is true, as the lady said, that 99.7% of refuge places. Pardon me, I'm a bit out of breath. 99.7% of refuge places are for women, and virtually no provision for battered men.
Right. Well,
except that that's just not
true. But sure, you go ahead and continue to use this platform to spread your lies, Mike.
Well, listen. Let's leave Mike just now, Brenna. Let's come to Rachel, right? Yeah. A woman who is, expressing conflicted views. Rachel, is that a fair assessment of what you're saying here?
Yes, I can see exactly why that people are conflicted. I would agree wholeheartedly that there's not nearly enough places for battered men to go.
No, but let's not go down that tangent. One of the things that you said there, Rachel, was that if you were the mother of a son who was in this situation, and the girl in question was known or found to be, and I think you used the expression of looser morals, then that is something that you would want to be explored in court. Brenna, how do you respond to Rachel?
And Brenna, do you have a son?
No, I don't have a son, but I think
something, you will not be thinking along these lines, love, if you ever have a boy, if you ever have a son.
I think I'm still allowed to have an opinion.
Oh, completely. But I'm just saying, your opinions will be completely different if you ever have a little boy.
Well, I would hope that if I ever had a little boy, I would have taught him about consent, and I would have taught him about what a loving, healthy, mutually respectful relationship looks like. And what that does not look like is getting...
Brenna, if I could just say, both my boys are fully aware and are the loveliest lads and have been brought up by a wonderful man who respects and adores women and really likes them and respects them. So there's no problem with that. But you're not going to tell me...
I don't want to get into a discussion about your...
Well, hang on. Let's just speak one at a time. Let's one at a time.
Brenna, can I just say, you're not going to tell me that there's not a woman out there who doesn't put it about a bit, love to have men dangling on a string, love to be a bit teasy, a bit minxy, and whatnot. You're not going to tell me there's not a woman like that, and a little bit self-promoting and self-aggrandizing and attention-seeking.
What I will say is that sexual assault, rape, are horrifically. They are underreported.
And it didn't happen.
Well, hang on. Let Brenna respond. Let Brenna respond now, Rachel. She listened to you.
Rape and sexual assault are absolutely fundamentally underreported, and we know that. That's just what we know. I think the idea that women's sexual lives being dragged up like this, being discussed on a primetime radio, TV program like this, what's that going to do to people, to women who have been attacked, who have been raped, and who still have not yet come forward? Because women don't necessarily feel ready to do it the next day, the next hour. It sometimes can take weeks, months, and years for women to come forward. And I think that we really have to be really careful when we're speaking about this idea that women, inverted commas, of looser morals are not going to be raped. Women who get drunk aren't going to be raped. Rape and sexual assault and domestic violence knows no ethnic boundaries. It knows no class boundaries. It happens across society, and it happens because women are not yet equal to men. And I'm sure that Mike Buchanan would disagree with me on that, but frankly, I don't really care what he thinks.
Okay, all right. But and just to clarify, the reason that we're talking about sexual history on this radio programme this morning is the fact that actually it was key in getting Ched Evans acquitted in his retrial, and that decision was taken on Friday. So I think it's absolutely relevant to our discussion this morning. Gabrielle is on the line. Good morning, Gabrielle.
Good morning.
Good morning. What are your thoughts, Gabrielle?
I have to agree with a lot of what Brenda just said. I think that's her name. But I also agree somewhat with anonymity, because from the point of the victim and from the point of the accused, I think it doesn't do the victim any favours when we find out that the accused is an athlete, because as soon as we know the accused is an athlete and a successful person, instantly the victim does start to get blamed, and she does start to say that people do start to say on social media that she's ruining his career. We've seen it in America so many times recently in the last few years where a I guess in inverted commas, jock has committed a horrible crime, and then it's the victim that receives this sort of horrendous abuse because she's ruined his career for being a victim. But I was actually calling to say that we need to stop telling women to not get so drunk, and instead say to all people, stop getting out of control drunk, because it's both the men and the women that that need to stop getting out of control drunk. There is a bit of a problem with victim blaming that we do need to maybe get ourselves out of, because we are in a bit of a rut there. We wouldn't ever victim blame with any other crime.
I mean, one of the things that Ched Evans has said, over the weekend, and in fact, in advance of that verdict, was that we do need to have greater education around the issues of alcohol and sexual consent. And clearly, the law is struggling a bit, isn't it, to deal with common behaviours. Of both sexes getting blind drunk and having sex.
I know it's a big problem in schools, because we teach people how to not get pregnant, or we teach people or if you go to sort of a Catholic school, you're taught just to not at all. But we need to sort of teach people about what a healthy relationship looks like. We need to teach people how to actually have a fun sort of physical relationship with one another, and sort of how to make each other happy, rather than just saying the very sort of basic things. I guess we're a bit overly British about sort of physical relationships, and instead we need to be perhaps more open.
And maybe that's why alcohol comes into play so often.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of where your sympathies lie, and I'm not trying to lead you, but I mean, if you've been following this case at all, what's your kind of gut on it?
My gut on it is I feel very sorry for the woman, because I know that she's received sort of a really sort of tough stick from people, from the public, although obviously justice has spoken, justice often always speaks in favour of men in this situation, because it is so hard to prove these things.
Do you feel any sympathy for Ched Evans?
I don't know yet. I think I'm not informed enough to have sympathy for him. And yeah, I'm being a bit scientific about this, but and I guess also I haven't followed it enough to say. But my initial instinct was to sort of think that he was in the wrong, because I think he used his sort of power and his position to his advantage. But yeah, again, I don't know the full details of the situation, so I'm not going to take one side or another.
Gabrielle, thank you very much indeed. 0500 92 95 00. Let me know how you feel about it. Let's speak to Niall McCluskey, who is an advocate specialising in criminal law. Good morning to you, Niall.
Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. Is the law equipped to deal with these very, very murky waters that we are in now?
I suppose the answer to that might be yes and no. I mean, I think the law is very clear. If a woman is so drunk that she's incapable of giving consent, then if someone has sex with her, that's rape. That is absolutely crystal clear. And in this particular case, that is what the complainer, her position was. She didn't remember what had taken place, and from that you could infer that she can't remember what's taken place. From her perspective, she must have been so drunk that she was incapable of giving consent. The position of Evans, that she'd used the language that she'd used effectively, I suppose his position would be she was using that language because she was capable of engaging in a sexual relationship, and that language demonstrated that. And in order to kind of, I suppose, support the point in relation to that, that's why they sought to lead the evidence of the two other individuals who said there had been similar sexual encounters where similar language had been used. I have to say that I found the appeal court decision where they admitted the evidence of the two other individuals is one that a different composition of the court or a Scottish court may have come to a different decision.
Right. I mean, these two fresh witnesses that have come forward that seem to be key in having this conviction. I don't know, quashed probably isn't the right expression.
Quashed is the correct.
It is. Quashed. Okay. Was their evidence then corroborated? I mean, they both claim to have had sex with this woman around about the time that the alleged assault, no longer an assault, took place. And as you say, used similar language, or heard the woman use similar language. Does she agree that she had sex with these people at this time? I mean, or is this just their word for it, or what?
I don't know about what took place in the second trial, and certainly by the stage at which the appeal court had come to the decision that this evidence was admissible, she had, as I understand it, not been asked about her position in relation to that new evidence. And I think that's where a Scottish court might have taken a different decision from the English court. The reason for that is that Scottish courts, as well as looking at what the statute says about admitting this type of evidence, will also look at whether or not the evidence is collateral. And a collateral matter is usually a matter that is not directly related to the matter at trial, but there's a factual dispute over. So the Scottish courts would, I think, have been unhappy about the fact that there may have been a factual dispute about those matters, because they don't like those sort of lines being raised at a trial when it diverts from the key issue at the trial, i.e. the situation between the Evans and the women. So I have certainly a reservation that the Scottish court would not have admitted this evidence. I can't say for sure, but I would say there's a big question mark as to whether it had been allowed in Scotland.
Right. Well, what about Mike Buchanan's point that the law is loaded against men, that in situations where sex takes place in these kind of... I keep using this word murky, I'll have to think of another one, but where there is a lot of alcohol involved, where there is loss of memory, etc., it's only ever the bloke that is held criminally responsible.
Well, I think that he's wrong on one matter. I mean, a woman cannot be convicted of rape, but women can be convicted of sexual assault. So that is absolutely clear. So it's not entirely the case that women can't be convicted in relation to sexual assaults. I think the difficulty is that the law. If a male can see that a woman is so drunk that she can't consent, then that is, if they were to have sex with her, then that, of course, would be rape. The difficulty, I suppose, and suppose Mike's point might be this, is if you say you had a male and a female who, let's say, are both blackout drunk, and neither of them know neither of them know what they're doing, neither of them are really in a position to make an informed decision about what they're doing, then in theory, I suppose, in that kind of scenario, the male, even though he's blackout drunk and in the same sort of state as the woman, he could potentially be guilty of rape, whereas the woman, whereas he's really just exactly the same condition as the woman. But the law doesn't really answer that particular question in a way that's satisfactory. I think that might be the most I would concede in relation to the points that Mike's making.
Okay. Now, thanks. Let's get back to your calls after this. 0500 92 95 88. Let's get back to your calls and thoughts on the Ched Evans case. KPC says, I can't believe what I'm hearing. I can't believe that someone's sexual history is used in a decision like this. It scares me. When I was younger, I was very sexually active, but now due to health and disability, it is a different story. Andy says, was Ched Evans' sexual history brought into question? Kath from Mollinsborough, my husband goes out with two friends and gets very drunk. He decides to leave the car. His pals persuade him to drive home. He does and gets caught. He was too drunk to give consent. Is he or his pals guilty of drink driving? Life is complicated. I find it easier to stay sober. And this one here is responding to Rachel, who says, Rachel, one of our callers, saying, well, if you had boys, then you would want to know the sexual history of a girl that was accusing your son of this. And this text says, oof, Rachel, what if you had a daughter that had been treated that way? This is not a simple one. Alan, good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Kay.
Good morning, Alan. What's your reaction to this?
Right, my reaction is, I think I'm going to agree with the First Lady who was on this morning, Kay. I feel very sad about this, and I think there's only three people who actually knew what happened there. The girl, the first gentleman who she consented with, if he was in a hotel room, and Ched Evans. So it's really difficult for the jury on this. But my point, which I find baffling, and I'm sure it may have come up in court, if this girl couldn't remember anything at all, she was blacked out, couldn't remember anything, why would you even know then that Ched Evans was in the room? And why would you know that you actually had sex with her? Well, if you can't remember anything.
Well, we do know that, Alan. And what happened was that she woke up in the morning alone with no memory of what had happened, and her bag was missing. And so she went to the police. And so when the police were investigating, and they were looking for various witnesses to find out what happened to this girl overnight, they came across Ched Evans and I think it's Clay McDonald, the other guy.
Right.
Was and they said, yes, we did have sex with her. And so that is how we know that they did have sex with her on that evening, because they said that they did. And it was then their decision, the police's decision, to advance that into the criminal justice system and take a rape case against them.
But this is, I mean, I'm actually, my mum lives in Gourock and I'm actually in Peterborough. So if my mum's listening, she'd be into this and all this sort of stuff, because she's always sort of, when I was growing up, she's always saying, be careful when you go out, etc. But I feel sorry for the jury here, because British law is it's got to be found somebody guilty, you've got to be clear on beyond reasonable doubt. And how can anybody beyond reasonable doubt? So I would have hated to be on that jury. I feel sorry for the girl, because no matter what, your past, your past. I'm 57 years of age, and I've had a past, and I'm going out with a younger girl. She's had a past, and I've always said to her, my girlfriend, your past until you bring it into the present. So if she was to see an ex-boyfriend when she would see me, then that's got nothing to do with the past. That's to do with the future. So I feel that that young girl, I feel sorry for her. It doesn't matter what she was like. Everybody, she's not the first, and she won't be the last.
Do you feel sorry for him?
I've got to be honest. He was stone cold sober.
Well, we don't know he was stone cold sober.
Well, that's the thing. If he was drunk as well, then you don't know. But one of your callers did say, what sort of moral right is he got? But if he was sober and he knew that this girl was incapable, then I know for a fact that's something that I wouldn't have done.
Yeah. But that's it. That is the line between morality, which we can all have an opinion on, and criminality, which the law has to decide on. I mean, somebody else, I think, on the same lines as you there, Alan, texting and saying, I have two sons who would not have sex with a woman who was drunk because they know that a woman who is drunk cannot give consent. I can't believe what I'm hearing this morning. No matter what the woman's sexual history is, if she is drunk, she cannot give consent because her capacity to make a decision is compromised. Let's bring in Karen. Hi, Karen. Morning, Karen. Hi, Karen. Can you hear me?
Hello, everyone here.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm not here. It's just that I have a workman here, so I can't stay on for long. I just wanted to say I feel very sad about the whole thing, but I'm also horrified at people's attitudes, and emotions seem to run very, very high. I mean, I have a history of abuse and rape as a young woman, and, obviously there's a lot of healing. I'm a much older woman now, but I feel very sad that this situation has occurred so many times in my life when I was younger, either with alcohol or drugs involved. There was all sorts of appalling sexual stuff going on. And, nice women's sons behaved appallingly with alcohol. I have sons, and I would be horrified if they ever behaved like that towards women. So there's a whole attitude in society, whether it's towards men or women, lack of respect for them as human beings. Human beings.
Do you think this judgment has done anything to improve that situation?
No, it doesn't. It hasn't. I mean, nobody knows who's at fault here.
No.
I never took any criminal action because there was no proof. I mean, I have obviously dealt with it on an emotional level, but there was no proof. I mean, nice women's sons locked me in rooms, Nice women's sons, when they had alcohol, behaved appallingly. And I've watched them behave badly towards women as well. And that saddens me. That people and women can behave in an atrociously disrespectful way towards men as well. I mean, I've actually said to women, sorry, I have sons, I have husbands, I love men. I won't speak disrespectfully of men either. Human beings. So there's a terrible sickness somewhere in society in terms of sexuality. And, where there's alcohol and drugs involved, who is culpable?
Yeah, Karen, thank you very much indeed. We're kind of right out of time too. We're running up to the news, but that does seem to be a very appropriate note to end this on. Kenny in Erskine says, I think this is a tragedy for all parties. I appreciate there's some major issues in relation to the whole issue of consent. However, I do wonder if the whole football culture is the key factor. Players being seen as gods with huge salaries, young women wanting to be wags. Should we not be dealing with this issue? Thanks for all your messages about this.